We are back on deck for Moments That Matter. It is brought to you by Mitsubishi Motors, who are celebrating 45 years of excellence. And did we see some excellence across the course of round 5? I'm Jack Everin. The man who is as smooth, of course, as the Mitsubishi Outlander is Derek Rucker. Ruck, great to see you. Funny old weekend, this one.
It certainly was, and a lot to get through. But, Jack, we're starting to see the bell curve of the NBL come to fruition. Two teams that are kind of separating themselves from the pack, two teams really struggling, and then 6 teams in the middle where when they play each other, who knows what can transpire.
Just explain the bell curve to me and a few others as well, if you can, please.
Well, the bell curve goes like this, and we've got the two teams here, that big middle class, and then we've got two teams at, even though it's not the top, they're at the bottom.
Why don't we talk about one of the teams who are absolutely on fire right now, and that is Melbourne United, who are undefeated. We couldn't be together last week on the show, so we couldn't talk about them being undefeated then. A round on, they're still undefeated.
They're an outstanding franchise, and we know this. And now that they've added Chris Goulding back into the mix, it's really strengthened what they are. But, Jack, they're building their success off the recruitment of 3 high-level imports who actually play the perfect style for Melbourne United. And they fluctuated with their success on an individual level, each of them. Jesse Edwards wasn't great yesterday, but he's still out there. He's a threat. He's working. He's contributing to winning basketball games. But that guy right there.
Oh, what about this guy?
He's come back after the injury, and I thought it was going to be a scenario where he works himself back into the rotation. He tries to figure out the rhythm of the game now that they have a couple of new pieces. But, Jack, he's come in, and after 3 games, he's averaging 20 points a game. Yesterday, he gave him 23. He's shooting the ball at 46% from the three-point line. I said that the rest early in the season was going to be good for him. I didn't expect it to be great for him.
So here's the interesting conundrum, if you want to call it that, with Melbourne United, is that Chris Goulding in his 3 games has come off the bench. Tanner Krebs has started, and he's having a career-high season so far. And shout out to Tanner. I'll get to him a little bit later on as well. What's Dean Vickerman thinking here? We debated this yesterday in commentary. Do you leave it the way it is, or do you change and go back to Chris Goulding as a starter?
I'm going to leave it the way it is. Remember, they have had success years ago with Chris coming off the bench. Now, maybe this isn't the role that he wants to play. Everybody wants to be a starter, especially when you're an elite superstar like CG43 is. But within the framework of this team, it may work in this fashion for a while. And still remember, they've got Shea Illy to come back. So maybe Dean is just holding off until he has his whole roster accessible to him, and then make that final determination on what his starting lineup looks like and what the rotation subsequently look like. But I don't think they're under any pressure at the moment. They're 7-0, and I still believe Dean is tinkering in-game with lineups, sets, schemes, etc.
Before we get to Adelaide, just on Melbourne, are they, I mean, they are the only undefeated team, but are they clearly the best team in the NBL right now?
They are, but guess what, Jack? They play Adelaide next Sunday. And I'm going to reserve my judgment on how much better they are than the rest of the league, but they have been dominant. If you look at some of their individual advanced metrics, right now there's something like a plus 20 net rating. One of the best net ratings we've seen in NBL history was last season by Illawarra, and they were a plus 12. So Melbourne United are playing a brand of basketball that is more dominant than what we saw from a dominant championship team last season in the Illawarra Hawks.
So we do a lot of games, obviously, and we love every game that we're involved in here in the NBL, but there are certain few games that you circle on the calendar. And I must admit, Sunday coming up, Melbourne versus Adelaide, is one that I've absolutely got circled. We both have, because the man comes to town. Bryce Cotton turns up to Melbourne, and if he does even a quarter of what he did against the Cairns Taipans on the weekend, then this thing is going to be on, because Bryce dropped a 50-piece like it was nothing.
Well, I think Cairns have applied to ban Bryce Cotton from far north Queensland because he's just been torching these guys every time he goes up there. He gave him 53, Jack, and it was in all sorts of entertaining fashion. He's knocking down jumpers. He was getting to the rack. He was doing it in transition, but sometimes the Cairns Taipans assisted him by just playing poor defense and not using the proper pick and roll coverage. You cannot play drops against Bryce Cotton. In fact, I'm not even sure you can use any form of showing, hard show, soft show, hedging. No, there's only one way to attack this now. The Sydney Kings gave the league the blueprint
so
on
why
how to
didn't
go.
Cairns do that
I have
then?
no
Yeah.
idea, Jack.
Yeah.
It's driving me crazy during the call. Now, that's 2 straight Adelaide games I've done. I did the Southeast Melbourne game, and I was shocked that Southeast Melbourne kind of let Bryce do his thing so carefree with the basketball, because Josh King is one of the prominent defensive coaches in the competition. And then Adam Ford, another really good defensive coach, I thought that they would have been schemed up a lot better, but they let Bryce just run amok and do whatever. And if you're allowing Bryce to play one-on-one basketball, let's understand this. At his best, he is 20% better than everybody else in the competition, okay? When he gets it going like that, you have absolutely no chance of stopping him with one man. You've got to send 2, and at times, I saw 3 men rush to the basketball, but it was too late. He already had 40 plus at that point. So, you know, we say it, and it's just not a trite comment, but you must take the ball out of his hands if you want to have a chance at winning basketball games.
I think we can say with certainty that Dean Vickerman will do that on Sunday when Melbourne play Adelaide. Just on the 36ers, though, Derek, I mean, the benchmark's cooking.
Yeah.
Isaac Humphries is having a really good season. Zylan Cheatham slotted in nicely. Flynn Cameron is relishing a bit more responsibility. Dejan Vasiljevic, let's just talk a little bit about him. Is there anything to be concerned about here? We know DJ. We know that DJ would want volume, so he would be, in his own mind, starting to think about this a little bit as well. Are you okay with him and how that's all working, or does that need to be looked at?
So you do a deep dive into his performance the other night, and I thought he took some poor shots compared to his last game in Cairns, where he came out, got the ball early, had good usage, got good looks at it. And I think he's probably going to have to be really intelligent about how he plays the game on a game-by-game basis. Sometimes Bryce is going to get it going early. Sometimes Bryce is going to feel the game out. And it's in those moments where Bryce is allowing the game to come to him is where DJ can slot himself in and be more assertive, more aggressive. I think the Sixers have to do a better job as a team in making sure that DJ gets proper touches in the right spaces so his anxiety doesn't build and he doesn't take bad shots. And they've done a really good job of that with Isaac Humphries this season. But the other thing from DJ, if he could just be patient with his shot selection, he's naturally, organically going to get a lot of good looks because of the nature of the 36ers offense, which is really good. And Bryce Cotton being such a selfless player, he will move the ball and distribute the ball. And look, I think DJ can easily get 10 shot attempts a game if he is just willing to ride it out and wait for his opportunities.
So you were in Sydney yesterday for Sydney and Perth, which is a game that's got a lot of talking points about it. Firstly, Brian Goorjian getting ejected. Now, this is not something we see very often. He is an emotive coach, but very rarely does Gorge get tossed. Now, this happened pretty early in the game. We're about to see it on the screen here, but you were there, you were courtside. What did you see? What actually transpired here?
Well, firstly, I think those who have followed me in the media know that I am not a ref basher. I'm not someone out here who's trying to really blame every victory or every loss on the referees. I let the fans do that. But let's be clear. This was disrespectful to this man. He's one of the greatest identities in NBL history. And what did he do? He jumped up in a reaction to a call, which, by the way, Jack, was a good call.
Yep.
Okay, but he stomps his feet. We could hear it on our audio mics in venue. He gets a technical for that and perhaps encroaching beyond the coach's box, which is silly. That's the type of tea that you give to a new coach, a rookie coach, someone who doesn't understand what's going on, and you're trying to get him to understand how we get down in this league. But that's not how you treat Brian Goorjian.
Yeah, I think you could comfortably name 30 incidents this season alone and another 80 from last season that were probably worse than what we just saw there.
Now, the second technical, there was some conversation over what was said. Now, I've done a little bit of research. I had discussions post-game at Kudos Bank Arena with several different Kings people. And what we heard was that Brian Goorjian said, "You're a joke," to the referee.
Right.
That's what the referee claimed. Now, It wasn't in that a simple language, but that was the claim.
So what about this one? This is John Rillie getting a tech. That was the action involving Jaylen Rillie and Bull Qual. What did you see here?
Bull Qual assaulted Jaylen Rillie, pushed him in the back. There were at least 3 fouls on that play. So that incenses John Rillie, not only from a team perspective, but he just saw his son get bullied and a call was not made. The referee comes over immediately to John Rillie and tees him up for acting, in an obnoxious manner. If you blow a call as a referee, you must learn to defuse the situation by acknowledging that you missed that call. Now, that may raise the ire in the short term, but I think it settles things down a lot quicker than trying to prove your point that you didn't make a mistake. That was a blatant, poor, blown call, and John Rillie, to get a technical on back of it, kind of compounded the referee's error.
Not often we talk about refereeing on this show. It's not really our bag, as you said, but this is all about the moments that mattered across the game and across the round, and they were 2 key moments. When the game was up for grabs, though, Derek, in the fourth quarter, Sydney managed that game so much better than the Perth Wildcats, and they won the quarter 20-6. In the end, they were able to cruise to a victory. What did Sydney do well in Q4, and what did Perth not do well?
Well, let me rewind it back a little bit and go to Q1, where they actually changed the rotation with Dellavedova and Davis, and they let them each handle the ball without the other on the floor at times, okay? But in the second half, they really got it going, and Kendrick played outstanding in that third quarter when Dellavedova was on the bench. And then they did the same thing and pulled Kendrick out of the game and put Delly in, and Delly went on a nice little tear. But in the fourth quarter, they cranked their defense up, and I thought the ejection of Brian Goorjian actually intensified that Sydney Kings defensive effort. And, Jack, they held Perth to 6 points in the fourth quarter, including no scores for the final 6:38. Jaylen Rillie hits a 3 to make it 79-72 with 6 minutes and 38 seconds, and that was it.
When Sydney ratchet up their D like that, and we were talking about the Bryce Cotton game from a couple of weeks ago, if they can defend at that sort of level, Derek, for 3 quarters, for 4 quarters, it feels like they're going to be a real handful.
They are, and they've started to improve their rebounding. Their offense, I think, is starting to click. It still doesn't look smooth at times, but Bull Qual is getting better.
Yep.
Xavier Cooks made enough free throws yesterday. Tim Suarez is steady, and if they can work out this combination of Dellavedova and Kendrick Davis on the offensive end, then I think we see Sydney perhaps work their way out of that bell curve or up that bell curve a little bit and break out of the middle class, because there's enough talent there. And congratulations to Andrew Bogut, who claims his first victory as a head coach.
Is he claiming that one, is he?
I think he's going to claim that one. We might have to check the record books and check the bylaws of the NBL to see who gets credit for that victory.
Well, I'm confused because Billy took the first 2 timeouts. So do they share the win? Oh, I'm not too sure.
Well, that was interesting because Billy, we really don't know the hierarchy of the Sydney Kings coaching roster, but Billy did step up. He's an experienced coach, and he's coached in the NBL for a number of years, but it wound up as Andrew Bogut leading that team in the fourth quarter and doing, hey, if you can hold any team to 6 points, you've done a very good job.
Just on the Perth Wildcats, they have an import spot available at the moment since they made the decision on Mason Jones. Now, there have probably been no bigger supporters of Jaylen Rillie than the 2 of us on this show, and Dante Russo-Nance is getting some opportunities. But to your eye there, being at the venue yesterday, was it obvious that while Jaren's developing and Dante's been okay, that's where they need the import point guard?
Yeah, there's no doubt they need that leader out there on the floor. They need a little bit more quickness, and you saw some ball handling miscues from the Perth Wildcats young guards, and it led to easy opportunities for the Sydney Kings. And in a close game, those types of turnovers matter. But I think Jaylen Rillie, once you get a quality import guard in there at the point position, then he slots back into that backup role. I have him in front of Dante at the moment. And then Russo-Nance kind of becomes that emergency third point guard. Ben Henschel needs to pick up his play. He had some terrible turnovers in that third quarter and then again in the fourth quarter. He's tried to pick up his defensive effort. I like that. I respect that. I think he can become a very good defender, but he hasn't learned how to play at the defensive effort level without fouling.
Saturday night at John Cain Arena, it was the shock of the round. Depending on which way you wanted to split that between Illawarra and South East Melbourne, some had the Hawks as favourites, some had the Phoenix as favourites. I'm not sure that anyone saw the result coming the way that it panned out. And Angus Glover had himself a night. Now, there will be a lot of people that watch Saturday night so happy for this guy who's been through so many challenges with injury, has left Sydney to go to South East Melbourne for more opportunity. This was his night. He completely shot the lights out.
It was. I believe he hit 7 threes in that first half, and Southeast Melbourne cranked it up and did exactly what Josh King wants them to do. Be stifling and suffocating on the defensive end, and then get out and run and shoot the 3 ball. I thought Nathan Sobey was terrific in the way he played the basketball game. Foxwell was strong. And Jordy Hunter, although he's not accumulating great aggregate counting stats, his advanced metrics are off the charts. In fact, his net rating is somewhere up around plus 30 from his minutes on the court. But I think, Josh King is an emotional guy. He's a defensively driven guy. And I thought that was the perfect Josh King basketball victory.
And let's not forget, they were pretty average against Adelaide on Thursday night.
Yeah.
But the mark of a team who are perhaps building towards something is to not have 2 bad ones in a row.
You get the cricket bat out, you take them out the back, and you really whip them hard. And that's what they did. But, Jack, I'm more concerned about Illawarra than I am appreciative of what Southeast Melbourne did.
Well, let's talk about their turnovers first and foremost. This is your wheelhouse. You were so careful with the basketball when you played. They had 24 of them, and some of them that you'll see here were just inexcusable.
Now, is Davo Hickey going to solve all of this, Jack? I don't know, but they've got to get a strong guard in there that can distribute, that can score, but that can take the burden off of Tyler Harvey. He's having to work too hard to get opportunities. Tyler is really good when you start him at the 2 and you run him around, and then once he gets into the rhythm of the game, then you put the ball in his hands, and then he can direct and lead the offense. I'm still not convinced they know how to play offensive basketball with JaVale McGee. McGee also presents some defensive problems because of the way he has been conditioned to play pick and roll, and maybe some of those options don't work well in our league. But look, he is a force, and you don't get the opportunity to get that type of talent in our league. So the onus is on the coaching staff to figure out how they utilize McGee and to incorporate him into a defensive structure that benefits the team.
You can't blame that one on Ja'Cory McLaughlin. The fingernail-deep analysis from some on the Illawarra Hawks has been, it's all Ja'Cory McLaughlin's fault. We'll get another import point guard who's better and things are going to change. He wasn't there Saturday night, and they burped that ball up in a diabolical manner. Derek, there has to be more going wrong with this team right now than just the import point guard spot, surely.
Well, you just wonder what the hunger levels are like. And again, they lost so much talent and so many guys that had been through hard times there at Illawarra and who were really motivated and inspired last season to pursue that championship. But the loss of talent is a very hard one to overcome. And you need so many things to go in your favor in terms of good health, guys finding form, and right now Illawarra have none of that. Is Davo Hickey going to change the fortunes? Man, that's putting a lot of pressure on Davo.
Are they vulnerable at the 4? This is the other thing about this Illawarra team. Darius Days was solid last year in a championship team. He wasn't an all-NBL first teamer, but he gave you something. Like, is there not enough behind JaVale McGee to support him there?
Well, Mason Peatling, we know he's a really good role player, and he was pivotal once he went into the starting lineup last season in assisting in changing the fortunes and making that team look totally different. And I think Peatling has had a solid season thus far, but whether or not he meshes as well with JaVale McGee as he did with Sam Froling remains to be seen. And I think also Illawarra need to be careful not to overuse McGee. I saw him starting to hobble a little bit, and he's taking falls, and I think they just need to protect him because, again, we can't rule Justin Tatum out. This is a guy who changed the way this franchise has been perceived over the past 2 seasons. So he's a smart basketball coach. I think he'll figure it out. But right now, it looks miserable.
Yeah, they seem a long way off the Illawarra Hawks. We're not writing them off yet, but there's a lot of work to do there. Before we get the thumbs up, thumbs down, two imports who have been under pressure to start this season. Firstly, Isaiah Brockington of the New Zealand Breakers, who strung together two good performances across the round. Does it just take a bit of the pressure off him now? Do you think he's starting to work this whole thing out?
It looks better, but the Breakers expected to win basketball games this season, and they went 1-1 in this round. Yesterday it was tough. Like, I know they had travel problems getting into Melbourne out of New Zealand, so they didn't get to their hotel till like 8 p.m. the night before the game. So that's tough. But Brockington's starting to look like the guy we saw at the Blitz. I don't think, given the market right now, that you can look at changing him. And I think he's shown enough that you're going to ride with him through the course of this season and just hope for the best. PJC's playing good basketball. They've just got to win most of their games at home and then try and steal a couple on the road. Their schedule does get a little bit lighter, considering no schedule is really easy in the NBL. It's really difficult to win basketball games, but New Zealand, I believe, over the next 3 to 4 rounds, Jack, has a chance to turn this around slightly before we get into the FIBA break.
And then the other is Jaylen Adams. There were rumours circling late last week that Brisbane were perhaps evaluating that position. They've still got another import spot to fill, which we believe is close. But there were rumours around the league last week that Jaylen Adams was being looked at as a potential change there as well. They didn't win against Melbourne on Friday night, but if Jaylen Adams certainly gave them every chance to win the game.
He was brilliant. And when Jaylen Adams decides he wants to do this, he can summons this at will. He can just go and dominate a basketball game. But Jack, how do you get this performance out of him on the regular? How do you get his demeanor to look activated so he does that type of stuff? What does it take to motivate Jaylen? And that is a challenge, not only for the Bullets coaching staff, but for Jaylen himself. Because my fear as a former player and someone who played a long time is you don't want to look back at the end of your career thinking, I wish I would have. I could have done this. You want to maximize all of that potential you have, and this is the perfect league for Jaylen Adams to perform in and have a long career in. He's someone who is adored by so many fans and want to see him excel. But ultimately, you know, I mentioned the coaching staff. Ultimately, it is up to Jaylen Adams to decide if he wants to be an MVP level player again.
Would you keep him?
Ooh, that's a tough one. If he is committed to this type, now I don't need 29 points. I want to see 18, 19 points, 7 assists, good defense. We know he can get steals. He can be disruptive on the defensive end. But I need a little bit more leadership and engagement to the team concept and what the values of the program are. But I've always liked Jaylen as a player, and I would not get rid of him because, again, his talent is too immense.
Let's finish up with thumbs up and thumbs down, the good and the bad from round 5. Why don't we start with the bad? Let's start with thumbs down.
Thumbs down. I'm going to give it to the Perth Wildcats. That was a tough weekend. The loss to the Brisbane Bullets out at RAC Arena was kind of an omen for the round. Not only did they lose to them, they got thumped on their home court. Defensively, they were porous. And then yesterday in Sydney, they just ran up against a team that probably wanted a little bit more than they did. Dylan Windler gets hurt. Overall, it was a rough weekend. They've got to regroup. They've stayed in Sydney. They're going up to Cairns for the Ignite Cup game on Wednesday. If they drop that one, they will need to find a remedy really quickly.
My thumbs down for the weekend, unfortunately, has to be the Illawarra Hawks, because there is just so much there. Your job is to break down the X's and O's and why it all happens. Your opinion is the one that mattered most. I'm just talking about what I saw on Saturday night at John Cain Arena and body language, and the spark's just not there. And maybe that's the hardest part of the lot, is because that's like an intangible. How do you actually get the spark going? That's my biggest worry with the Hawks at the moment. As I say, not writing them off, but where is that spark? Where is that hunger and that drive?
Well, I think it's going to be up to Justin Tatum now to really drive this team. And I don't know the dynamics and the psychology of a lot of the players in that outfit, but Justin Tatum does.
Yes.
And it's his responsibility now to, whether you need to go to the whip hand, whether you need to massage egos, I don't know what it is, whether you need to do some bonding stuff, but they've got to get that team functioning as a tight-knit group with a common understanding and purpose of what it takes to win basketball games.
Thumbs up, the good from the weekend?
Chris Golding, dominant. Dominant. I did not anticipate this. Again, if he's not already 37, he will be turning 37. And I've said it numerous times, he has that one ability, shooting the basketball from three, that ages supremely well. But Jack, you know what he's doing exceptionally well is getting the ball on the deck, creating off the bounce. His ability to get to the basket has been really surprising, and it looks like it's something that he's worked on in the offseason. His handle looks tight, and right now, as a spark off that Melbourne United bench, where he comes in, and not to degrade the second stringers throughout the league, because this is a very talented league, but if he's playing against other bench players, Jack, it's unfair. It's not an equal matchup. And I said before, Bryce Cotton is 20% better than most of the players in this competition. Well, the same applies to Chris Golding if he's playing against rotation players.
I really wrestled with my thumbs up for this round. Apologies to the benchmark, Bryce Cotton, mainly because he's my thumbs up most weeks. Apologies to Angus Glover. We've already sung his praises.
Yeah.
We didn't get a chance from the same game to sing the praises of Parker Jackson-Cartwright, who very nearly had a triple-double in a loss. This guy is worth the price of admission. This guy, I would pay money to go and watch Parker Jackson-Cartwright play basketball every single week. You know why, Derek?
Why?
Because he gives you 100% effort 100% of the time. He wears his heart on his sleeve. He got really fired up a couple of times towards the end. He's not liking the fact that they're not winning games at the moment. But this guy, to me, typifies in many ways what this league's all about.
Yeah, and I think he is the one piece that New Zealand as a franchise must retain, because rarely do you get imports who have the type of affinity that Parker Jackson-Cartwright has for the Breakers and New Zealand. Yep. He chose to stay and remain and play for the Breakers when he had opportunities come to the mainland and play in Australia. So I think when you watch how he throws his body around, he's only a small guy, but he plays with a lot of passion. He plays with the enthusiasm. And when you look at the child market and the kids and the teenagers, they love PJC, and I just hope that the rest of the team is kind of able to rally around him so that we get the opportunity to see him playing some big games as the season progresses.
Yeah, I love watching him play. It was a privilege to watch him go about it yesterday. Unfortunately, though, for the Breakers, they couldn't get the win. That is us done and dusted for Moments That Matter. Don't forget, you can stay up to date with everything that you need to know at nbl.com.au and right across the week on the NBL socials. And this is the beauty of the Ignite Cup, Derek, is we can just roll around and we've got a game Wednesday night.
I know, big games too. As we said, Perth up in Cairns, and Cairns are feisty. Everybody's feisty in this league. I love it.
Yeah, we love it. We're going to go and have a bonding session of our own. Moments That Matter is brought to you by the great people at Mitsubishi Motors. We love their support and we love you watching us each and every week. We will catch you next Monday.